I'm Frank Rossi. I'm the Chief Science Officer for Sunday, and I'm here with one of our lawn advisors, Eric Dorr. And Eric, we spent a lot of time chatting about bad-looking lawns. All right, you got to set me up.
Okay, yeah.
All right,
so
you're Bud Abbott.
Yeah,
I'm Lou Costello.
So, Frank, everyone knows you like to talk a lot.
That's really good, Frank. Appreciate that in-depth assessment of something that no one cares about. How do these people fix their lawn? You know what I mean? Eric, why don't you talk a little bit about your role here at Sunday and the kind of fun things we get to do together?
Great, yeah, so I've been with Sunday since we launched in 2019 and been part of the lawn advising team pretty much that entire time. And really what our job is as lawn advisors is to know a lot about our products and give customers advice about selection and stuff like that, but it's also really to pick up where the products leave off. So Frank, we're looking at 3 different lawns from 3 different parts of the country, all coming out of the winter months. What are some things to keep in mind now that we're heading into spring, and of course summer is right around the corner?
Well, as we know, you got to recover, right? So if you got some damage, the best thing to do is get some grass planted. In the south, you can replug some areas. In the north, you can do some seeding. Make sure in both cases you get good contact with the soil and you're giving it the water and nutrients it needs to get going. Now, once it gets going, maybe you're going to start to get some weed problems. Spot treat, right? We don't want to blanket, we spot treat. From there, it's mow right, water right. Just make sure you're getting your mower as high as you can get it. Make sure the watering system is working right. Never mind how much you're using, but can it get the water out right? Those simple steps will get you ready for the summer stress.
So this first example that we're looking at is a customer in like the Great Lakes region. They're in Minneapolis, so they're recovering from their winter time. They have very bare spots in the front of the lawn, and they're looking for help on how to repair the area. So where do we start with this one?
Well, it's pretty typical, right? I mean, any place you get a hard winter, a lot of snow, people throwing salt, shoveling, walking on the edge of the lawns, compacting the soils. And then you got the added trouble of the trees causing problems here. You can see these panels are really thin and bare, and soil you can see at the surface is in rough shape. So you got short-term problems that, it's bare. You got long-term problems going to be limited in light, right? You got light levels limited soon, and you've got poor soil conditions. So first, if you really determined to have grass here, you got to have a shady mix. It would have been better to seed it up in the fall, and then patch it in the spring, but now you want to try to get the seed down as quick as possible while it doesn't need much supplemental watering early in the spring. Once it gets warmer, it's going to need some follow-up. But the bigger long-term problem, Eric, is the soil physical properties. That it doesn't drain well, that it doesn't look like it's sustaining grass. It looks like it's compacted, right? That favors a lot of weeds over good grasses like our shady mix. So fixing the soil here requires a couple of years of top dressing with a yard waste compost, seeding into that, and then allowing that grass to adapt to that condition. It'll always be a little bit thinner because of the light levels. Now, take the tree out, and then you got a lot more options. But if you're committed to this is a pretty typical problem. The only thing it doesn't have, it looks like in the background, no dog peeing on it. That would be the trifecta. Poor light, poor soil, and a pet, the other stressor that you have. So it's a tricky spot. It's all that pavement, all that debris that falls on there to get it fixed. But there's short-term and long-term solutions.
And so this isn't really, you're saying it's not unique to the Minneapolis area?
No. No, this is everywhere you get some snow, even down to Tennessee.
So this one, we talked about the winter damage that's happening, but before you know it, it's starting to warm up and we're getting into the summer months, and Minneapolis is a place with all 4 seasons. So how are we trying to head into the warmer months now that we've kind of started that seeding process off?
Yeah, it's really important to get that seed established before the leaves come out on the trees, right? We don't often think about that, but that's one of the critical aspects. And the success of any of these areas that we want to reestablish from seed is getting them established as good as possible right out of the gate. So if you can get 80 to 90% of this area filled in with grass, you got a good shot to have a nice lawn for the summer. If you only get about half of it going good, I'd say go back out with some more seed before the weeds fill in. So you might even plan to seed a couple of times, Eric. Get it going, see what comes up, see how it's starting to fill in, maybe go back and do some patching. And then after that, then you go back and you can start spot treating the weeds because you don't want them to get big and mature because they get harder to kill when they get like that. So it's a process of get the competition out there, help it along, and then systematically keep it plugging along. And once you make it through 1 year, next year you'll start at a higher level, so it'll be easy to just go up a notch.
Makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So this example we have is actually someone local to the Colorado area, in the Boulder, Denver area. And so in this case, I'm dealing with a slightly different issue because I think they have grub damage. So what are we noticing with this one on your first glance
Okay,
here?
so if we started with this picture, okay? When I look at this is the classic sign of some snow mold came in on the lawn. You can see that mottled brown stuff in here, right? You know, it looks like he scratched it up and put some patch mix in here.
Okay.
Or my eyes could be bad, and that's more dandelion doom treatment. Can you look at that and see?
It's hard to say. I mean,
You think that's seeded, or is that more weed control? Because this looks like snow mold. This, you see the matted down. You know, if I could get in there, I'd go right in here, and I'd see this matted tissue.
Okay.
Gonna do a little move here, and you get that matted tissue, and you scratch that up, and that's what I thought he did here. He scratched it up and then seeded it, right? So it looks like he had some mold in the winter, right? Which is not uncommon, even in arid climates, that if the snow sits out there a little bit. And he also looks like a young lawn. It looks like he's got some chlorosis in here a little bit. Looks like a relatively young lawn. It might not be. But either way, it's definitely thin. So scratching up these areas and getting the seed down, and then he's got this other bare area where, somehow he thinks he has a grub problem, which, my first suspicion is it's possible if you found the grubs and willing to take the time to say that the population was high enough. But what you and I know is it's more likely this big old tree here causing some of the trouble, even though it's in full sun. And it's along a couple of sidewalks here, right? It also looks like you got a driveway there. So first off, let's talk a little bit about grubs in lawns. And you get them out west, but we get them really heavy back east. Generally, what we find is the grubs themselves don't cause significant problems. It's the animals coming in and digging them up. So the lack of animal activity here makes me a little suspicious. Most people would put an insecticide down. What our research shows is about 80% of that insecticide use is either not needed or completely ineffective. That's a little bit concerning. So I want to be really careful when we say we got grub problems. And you really can't plant a lot of grasses that are going to make much difference. So if you have had a grub problem, we would like to see you seek some biological solutions to that, because we don't need more insecticide use in the urban environment. That's all I have to say about that.
That's the part of the challenge of diagnosing this stuff with some photos. We talk to the customer and we learn as much as we can about the lawn, but there's always a limit of what you can possibly do when you're dealing with this, because there could be multiple things causing this trouble.
But the place to start is that scratch it up, get the grass down, start to get some water on it. Make sure, especially in the arid west, you're using a more drought-tolerant grass like a tall fescue might be better in that setup, right? And get it established. That way it can get some roots in the ground before the real dry season comes, and we want to cut back our water a little bit, right? Moving forward. So let's see, how'd it turn out?
So yeah, we have about a follow-up from about a month later, and it's looking pretty good. We're definitely filling in nice here. Obviously the temperatures have warmed up, and we have an irrigation system going. There's some seeding done.
Yeah.
And
boy, it's really the color. You can even see where he didn't seed. The color's looking really good in some of these areas, but in these bare areas that were completely bare, he's like 80% full in a majority of the area. And then you see another part of the lawn, and we get closer here. Looks like he got some weed invasion, and he went back and spot treated with some dandelion doom, maybe even some weed warrior, knocked them back, and then you go in and you seed again. And it still looks like the trees aren't leafed out that much, so he's still gonna get some light in there. I think this is turning out really good because he's gonna get that seed in the ground, he's gonna get that second pouch application from our Smart Lawn Plan, and he's home free. And I gotta believe this customer is really satisfied with that dark green color of that lawn.
Yeah, and I think this is a good example of like its progress is happening. And it may not look perfect, especially overnight, but it's a full season. We're recovering from a winter, and seeding is a big part of that recovery.
It is.
Customers don't always understand that, grass is perennial, but they literally don't understand that you have to seed sometimes. Because it's like, oh, it lives, and it'll just fill in on its own. But it's not always doing that.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I remember early on when you and I started in this business, they would spray it on the brown stuff here, and why isn't it growing? And I do think one of the things that we try to lead with in Sunday is that keeping weeds out and keeping our herbicide use to a minimum is simply a matter of keeping that lawn dense and filled in. I'll say further, a lot of our most satisfied Sunday customers tolerate a little bit of incidental flowering plants in their lawns that might not be grasses. And as far as we're concerned, if the ground's covered and you're satisfied with it, this kind of progress is exactly what we're hoping for our customers.
Yeah, so we're very focused on like a seed forward approach, and sometimes our customers, this is a little bit new to them, especially in the spring months. So can you talk a little bit more about why we're really focusing on seeding as the recovery so much here, and why it might be new to someone coming from another way of caring for their lawn before trying Sunday?
The most common way that people come from caring from their lawn is the typical spring weed and feed. And what that means is they've applied an herbicide that creates a barrier that weeds can't grow through. It also means you can't plant grass into it. So because we don't blanket preventatively, we have the opportunity to grow grass from seed more readily. It's more readily available for us. And building that competition is a long-term solution that makes us less reliant on those herbicides. Now, if you get a couple of weeds coming through, we have spot treatment options. Again, instead of blanketing the lawn, we believe by just doing site-specific management, we can be just as successful and not add to those 90 million pounds of pesticides that get put on lawns every year.
Absolutely.
All right, where are we going next, Eric? Where are we going next, Eric?
Cool, so for this next case, we have a lawn near the Orlando area. So obviously this person's not getting a traditional full winter, but there's still some challenges that happen that time of year. So we'd love to kind of have your insight on like what's going on, what do you see with this picture, and what kind of experience does a person like that have coming out of the winter months?
Yeah, so first thing, winter, even though it doesn't get as cold, it slows down the warm season grass growth a little bit. The second thing is, even in the Northern Hemisphere, days are shorter. So light levels are lower. Any shade impact will be greater. So at this time, it's still not at full throttle. The growth potential we're talking is still in the 35 to 50% range. So I would almost say it's really just getting going, right? So the other thing you said was it's been on the dry side, right?
Yeah, this area, we didn't see a lot of measurable rain for most of April.
So that means they were really reliant on their irrigation system. Now this is where you come to find weaknesses. Back east, where it rains a little bit in northern climates, rain covers up for bad irrigation coverages because rain tends to be fairly uniform. When you're reliant on your irrigation system, you might see the weaknesses in it. So your sprinklers, as you can see in this picture, might not be hitting very well. And in other places might be overhitting.
Okay.
Now, the other thing is this might be a combination of overwatering and maybe a misapplication of a fertilizer, right? Where they put it on heavy in some areas and lighter in others. There might be a little bit of a misapplication here. The other thing I see when I look close is there's a lot of dead material down in here. Underneath the green grass.
Okay.
You see it from far here and you see it closer here, where there's a lot of brown leaves. When I see a lot of brown leaves underneath the canopy like this, it makes me think there's more stress to this lawn. So it's probably drought stress. It needs probably more uniform watering. And then you get other places where it looks like it's too wet, right? Here is an indication of just overwatering, saturated conditions, in my opinion, where you've got this dark mold that's persisted in this area. So it's overwatered, it's underwatered. It's over-fertilized, it's under-fertilized. So getting these folks calibrated and confident, first I'd start with checking your irrigation system, seeing that you're getting the most out of it. Second, I'd look at drainage in some of these areas. Is water accumulating when I get a 4-inch rainfall? Because everybody knows Florida's prone to those heavy dump thunderstorms, so this could be a drainage issue. So you've got getting the lawn watered right, getting it drained right, and then, getting the material applied uniformly so that you don't get what might be a little bit of non-uniform fertilizer. Now, I wanna say, something I am starting to see a little bit more. Put my glasses on, look close. You look at the edge here, look at this, Eric. Here, you're really brown here along where the mailbox is, really green, not so green, really brown. This is a classic not irrigation uniformity. So there definitely are irrigation system issues here. This looks a little bit more both like water and fertilizer.
Okay.
This looks like fungus, but again, when we see fungus on lawns, it's too late.
Yeah.
And what do we usually tell them? What's the first thing you tell a person when you see fungus like this about their irrigation system?
There's somewhere along the line, there's too much moisture, sitting moisture at the surface.
Or the heads are spraying too much there.
Yeah.
So it's, again, a good way to go out and start diagnosing that sprinkler. How do you tell them to do it? What do you tell a customer when you say, hey, you got to apply uniformly? What do they do? How do you tell them what to do?
Well, there are like such thing as sprinkler and rain gauges, but you can actually even use just like a few tuna cans or something like that throughout your lawn. And it just requires a little bit of auditing. You know, a few different spots, a few different times. Yeah. You kind of learn your sprinkler output. And once you learn it, it's not like you have to check it all the time. It's pretty,
because the spots show up quick. If you don't get rain for 2 weeks, I promise you where those sprinklers aren't hitting, the grass is gonna start looking brown there. Now, the other little hack might be, get the tuna fish can, put it out at night if you run the sprinklers like you should first thing in the morning, right? These people should be watering first thing in the morning. And at the same time, if they know a 4-inch rainfall or thunderstorms are common this time of year, wait till it looks a little bit like this, and then put the sprinklers on for about a half an hour. And then wait for the thunderstorm to come. Make room for the rain, right? Because if you keep this perfectly watered all the time, the rains come, it's got no place to go. That's an environmental problem.
I think these parts of the country where you get a substantial rain, we do try to tell people to be a little bit more reactive instead of proactive and wait until it feels like it needs that water, because otherwise, like you said, if you put too much on, then you're dealing with that fungal territory, and that's where you can definitely run into a different type of problem.
And we don't have, and there really aren't products we want to recommend for people. We don't have them, and we don't want them using pesticides, because by the time they see this, it's too late. This is time to scratch up and get going again.
Yeah, so let's talk about that now. We have a St. Augustine lawn. Yeah. What do we do to really kind of repair this area? So you're talking about scratching up. How much are we getting power tools? What are we doing?
Well, the first thing I would say, if we're looking at this particular picture here, the first thing I'd say is let's find out why it's so wet.
Yeah.
If the rain's accumulating there, we need a little bit of help in fixing that. Second, the beauty of the warm season grasses is you got seed on your own property. You can take plugs from other parts of the lawn and just insert them here. Make sure the soil's fixed if it's a drainage problem. Scratch it up and expose some of the soil so you can put the plugs into it and then treat it like it's seed right there. So the beauty of these warm season grasses is you can move them from one spot to another without seed, because you really don't get good seeded varieties of these grasses. Bermuda grass you can seed, and we've got a Bermuda thyme seed, but for St. Augustine grass, you want to self-propagate. Now, you can always go to the garden center, to the sod producer, and get some sod and put it down too. A little trickier, got to be a little bit more careful with the watering too.
And a little pricier.
A little pricier.
So you're willing to do some of that work up front, let the St. Augustine kind of work for you if you correct the things that are kind of causing the poor performance.
That's correct. And as we've already said 5 times today, it's probably watering most of the time. And it's, the thing that's weird about this, and this is where, people don't pay attention as much. It's like, they don't think about water maybe as much, that matters as much in May that they do when it starts getting hot in June, July, and August, right? So sometimes these spring watering issues creep up on you because your lawn's not used to being dry in the spring. So that's another thing. We get these anomalies from climate change, false springs, dry conditions that we don't normally get, particularly east of the Mississippi where we rely on rainfall. it catches you off guard. That's why a good lawn advisor is paying attention to those weather conditions all the time. I know you're always real timing your recommendations, right? That's why you ask them questions, and that's why you look at the weather.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah.
How was that?
That
Is
was
that good
great.
for you?
Yeah, that was
good
great.
for me. You want me to say thanks for joining me on, Frank f***ed it up? All right, Eric, that was a lot. What if they're sick of listening to us?
Then head over to the shed for more resources.